Howdy chaps, here we are again on the Landau. Now I thought I was going to film it and wasn't going to film it, but I need to pay a bit of attention today. But we're going to start off by showing you, because I put the panels on. If you look down that one, it's relatively straight, actually pretty damn straight. Remember, the bonnet's too far forwards at the moment. We go over here. And that's the problem. No matter what you do to that guard, you cannot get it to emerge from under that bonnet. The interesting thing is, this isn't the guard that was on this car when it arrived. It had its own sort of custom guard. So, yeah. And then when we got a better guard that was tweaked for this car, which, as in basically saying it's an original guard. I believe this guard may have even originated from the leftovers of the old Tonka shop. If you're from Sydney, there used to be a wrecker in Sydney called the Tonka shop, and he used to wreck Falcons for years and years and years. And then I believe he dealt with the wrong person or something, and they didn't like him, and they burnt his shop down or something like that. Something like that happened. And all the stuff was lost, including a lot of rare cars. But enough of that. That's a story I heard from years ago. But I believe that this guard originated from the leftovers. I think it was in one of his shipping containers. I believe my brother had access, bought it off him. I think the guy was selling a bunch of stuff. But anyway, enough story time. So this is the problem we've got. So this is pretty much lined up with the rail of the car, and so is this one. So you go down like this, and you know it's wide, and it's also partly open, but it's straight. So you stare down that, and I've noticed when you stand back here, the whole front of the car sort of leans over. So we're definitely going to do some cutting and some pulling and pushing with the Porta Power today. Have I worked out where I'm going to go from and to? I'll probably go from hook one of the feet in and around the shock tower there, and use the big rubber ball in the corner here because it's fairly soft. And I will have to cut this here, I reckon, and go back through where whoever did that. So eventually it may not look 100%, but we've got to get it to the point where you can actually shut the bonnet nicely and not have the guard overlap, because that's just, and it's stupid. Like, you can tell it's okay up there, quite a passable gap up there, and then it just disappears. And I was saying it's about 10 mil, but it needs to be probably more like 15. But do remember, if I can get it 10 mil, I can probably make up the next 5 in just adjusting. And I remember that I had trouble putting this little filler panel in, and you can see that one, that bracket is slightly bent to the left to make up for it. So I reckon if I can cut down there and here and push, I reckon I can rectify the whole front of this car. I just want to make sure that I'm not making gaps like this wrong, which, if I stretch my finger, yeah. See, it seems right, but somewhere it's not. And obviously this side is fairly reasonable because it's okay. And I'm not going to push the bonnet back and up against, you know, where it lines up with the front edge of the guards yet, because when it's all the way forward, there's no potential of the bonnet being slightly crooked in the hole. It's all the way forward, which means it's effectively straight, but just too far forward. And yeah, I'd like it so that this pin drops neatly in that hole, which is doable, and so I can have more adjustment on these bolts. So that's that. I actually picked up a pretty neat tool the other day. Here it is. Here it is. I'm going to be using this in the future. It's a profiler, I believe the name is, or something like that. You can use it to... Where am I going to use it on? if you wanted to get shapes right. This one's a bit stiff. But yes, copies the profile perfectly. Very, very handy for shaping and reshaping stuff. See, if you were to make that section on a piece of steel, you copy that and then you just make it on this side. So that's effectively the pillar, and yeah, so that's a pretty neat tool. And if you're playing around with cars a bit and you're doing some shaping, I would highly recommend that you acquire one of those. Maybe a slightly better branded one than that. That one's a bit too stiff, but you know, it seems to work. So yeah, that was a neat tool. I just wanted to show that one off. I was like, oh, I forgot to show that. And I forgot to finish off the video yesterday with showing that I had the panels on. What I'm going to do in a minute is I'm actually going to put the headlights in and see if I can bolt those in about right. I just want to make sure things are going to line up, because it is fairly important that it sits right when it's done. And I know a couple of people have mentioned that my camera skills and my presentation are not brilliant. It's because I'm not a cameraman, I'm not a presenter, I'm a panel beater / car enthusiast. Unfortunately, I'm not trained in making videos fantastic. One day I will get good at it, but it takes time. I've only been doing videos for about properly hammering out videos for about a year now, and we unburied that yesterday, so that's kind of cool. We will be getting back into that coupe very, very shortly. So yeah, and on the XB, the Project XB, I've got a couple of updates on that. The transmission, the Wrecker's transmission, the C4, she is not healthy. That is progressively getting worse and worse and worse, which isn't at all surprising, but sometimes you get lucky with stuff from the Wreckers and things just work perfectly, which is really awesome. But unfortunately the C4 is on the way out. So I'll probably go down the path of picking up a manual setup and stuff like that, because I do want that car to be manual. I also am picking up, hopefully in the next few days, another 302 and C4 setup from another lovely SA guy who has another coupe that's very well known and incredibly fast. He's pulling it out of one of his F trucks, and I put my hand up for, I call dibs on it. So hopefully I might better use that C4 in the XB in the short term while I chase up all the manual gear, which will be probably what I'll try and do. But I hate not having a decent income to fund my cars the way I want to fund them. Otherwise I'd be getting stuff done like the transmission. I'd just take that out and send it off to be done. But you know, that's life. And eventually I'll get to the point where I'm earning decent money from YouTube and I can fund my cars a bit better and have more fun and do much, much cooler things. But yeah, that's the thing. The YouTube money is a big part of it. That's why I always say like, share and subscribe, because you do get, and that's why you guys have to suffer through ads, because it helps build the channel basically. So every ad you watch actually helps fund the cars. So yeah, anyway, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm gonna catch up in a second when I tackle the front of this. I don't know if you can see it, but the sky has decided to fall in. Anyway, so I'm just going to push this car back a little, just because I'm in the doorway. Just put that out a bit, there we go. So what I've done is, I'm not too worried about this side because it's missing a couple of brackets in there on the guard, but I know the guard fits fairly well. I put in a spare set of headlights that my brother managed to acquire a few years ago from Port Wakefield Wreckers. They're in the boot of a P5 LTD. Actually, oddly enough, I believe the Port Wakefield Wreckers in South Australia still is one of the few places where you can find XA, BC sedans in there. I know there's no XAs, but there's definitely plenty of XB and XC sedans in there if you're in the South Australian region and you don't mind a drive. So what I've done is, I've got the headlights in. Now these headlights are partly disassembled. I'll show you how they actually function. They're pretty neat. because they've got little doors on them. Because on a Landau, the headlights, when the car is sort of off or you're not got the lights on, the headlights look like that. And then when you press the switch, the doors come up and you got your headlights. So we've got a functioning, I believe we have enough parts. There's one door, two door, grill, another grill. There's the other grill, yeah. So we've got enough parts to complete a set of headlights. Ironically, it was one of those things that you required 2 sets to make one. But there's one that's not pulled apart. But that's probably the best bit of Landaus. Probably the only bit I actually like about them. They always had the pop-up. But, you know, that being said, the P5 LTDs had them too, because the P5 is the sedan version of the Landau. So here we go. We've got all the front together. And when trial fitting and trying to straighten things up, it's a damn good idea that you have as much of the front together as you can. Now I'm, after much sussing, pretty confident that that main beam down there is straight. I don't reckon the chassis rails are out of square. I reckon it's the engine bay that's out of square. Everything has been near impossible to get to fit, so that's a little bit out. So everything's just... So in the first instance, I'm actually going to just put the porta power between here and there. And just give it a couple of light pumps just to see what happens. And then before I go cutting anything, because I'm thinking with 10 tons of pressure, I might be able to actually just bend it without breaking anything. Without having to cut and weld things. That would be ultimate. Because the other thing is, the other reason I think that thing down there is right, is when these are in the centre, so when you centre those in those holes, the thing actually leans over and lifts its foot up here. And it's slightly up here, and they're hard up against the side. So that's as far over as that can possibly go. Now this is one for my brother because he watches. There's the front of your car, about the most together it's been in probably 4 or 5 years. And yet, we still have some issues. It's everything on this side, headlight, guard, that filler panel, and even that center grille, everything is really tightly fitting in that space. So we need to get that top rail across, and everything should open up. You can even see it here. This is tighter here than it is here. You could park a bus through that gap. So, yeah. Mint. I'm going to get it set up now, and I'm going to give it a couple of pumps. Pump it up, yeah! And see how we go. We'll catch up in a second. I could almost celebrate right now. I have spent, between the last clip you saw and this one, has been about 3 hours. After much pushing, prying, jimmying, and bending with the porta power in every which way, I could not get this car to willingly bend back into its original shape. So unfortunately, like I suspected, when they joined the rad support, it was too far to the driver's side. So I have had to cut it, put the porta power in the engine bay, and literally push that skirt out of the way. So now I've got a 10mm gap, which I need to sort out. But first off, let's just get some gaps looking good. Now I have actually aligned the bonnet and guard and stuff to the driver's side, but I was like, right, bonnet lines up, hits a pin, lovely. After adjusting the little pin in the bonnet height and stuff like that, because obviously it came off a different car and nothing's perfect, I got that pretty close, within the tolerance that I'm allowed for this particular model of car. So, and obviously, you know, there's a mile of adjustment on everything. So I've got it to the point where I'm happy with it. Obviously, I've got that filler panel bolted to the guard. The guard is bolted on. Yes, I am cheating because I needed a bit of height. Ford used these at day one, so I figured I'm allowed to use them now. I found absolutely tons of those in my XB. Oh, maybe Ford didn't use them, but I don't know. Crash shops, I know I've seen tons of these spacing up guards on cars. Not just Fords, but Holdens and even Pontiacs. I had a few of those spacing up the guard in my old 66 Parisian. Which was a cool car, I wish I'd never sold. Yeah, well. But that gap there is pretty darn good if you work your way along that. I would consider that quite an acceptable bonnet gap for that side. And I just threw this guard on, as in just chucked the bolts in, just sat it on, and as you can see it's sort of hanging off the side of the car because none of the bolts are done up, they're just finger tight. And you can already tell that we've gained the amount we need because the bonnet is no longer over here. It is now over here with space. So once I whoops, that pops off. But once you gap it up, because it is horrendously loose, get in there. There you go. Once I gap that up, I reckon that will do quite nicely for the front of this, and then all I've got to do is sort out. Oh yeah, I got my little cable, so listen to that. Ah, magic. Magic, magic, magic. Alright. So that is where I had to gain. So this is... No, I'm not going to leave it like that. I know some people might. But I need to pretty this up and actually fill it properly. But this was... I was like, well, just stick a piece of steel in here and just see how I'm going. And see if I've gained it. So I tried every which way to get this thing to behave, and I'd poured a power down there, up to here, and over there, up to here, and over. It's just nearly impossible to push these cars because these are so weak, they just crush. So I've had to do a bit of panel beating to get them straight again, and that's all I've had to do here. I just had to put that little spacer in there, lift that guard up the thickness of that, and I think that's plenty acceptable. So that's where I had to gain. That made all of the difference. I definitely gained a few millimeters. I reckon I gained my 5mm in the beginning when I was pushing it without doing that. So I gained some there, but then I just got to the point where I just had to go. It's not behaving, so I'm just going to have to chop it and push it and see how that does it. So this didn't move, which is fantastic, but that one did, which is awesome. And obviously when I'm doing the engine bay better, I will neaten up those horrible welds that the last person had at it. Took the sound pad off, adjusted this was way too short because it just wouldn't hit it. So there's tons of adjustment in here too. But that's where I gained it. That's how much out of square that was. And it's still not 100% square. I've just had to go for a happy medium, otherwise I'm going to spend my life trying to get this car squared up, trying to rectify something that is just never going to behave. That is just it. I'd almost have to put a whole nother front clip on this thing and clean up all there, put another rad support on it. To do it right, you'd want to put another one of these rails in all the way back to the firewall, but we're not doing that. All we need is a happy medium, and unfortunately I've got it back to where it is going to behave. That is now, those bolts are now centered, which is awesome. That's standing up straight. Oops, watch that. Everything, just relieving that, which you'd believe when I cut that, it caught the disc. So actually what happened when I cut this is there was still tension on it from whatever happened here. Like, when I cut that, it just went and grabbed the disc and snapped about 3 cutting discs when I cut that. So there was pressure pushing that way from there. So I've had to cut it, push it, and I'm going to have to rejoin it. And that's where I had to gain the width to get it to behave. I don't know how I would love to know the dodginess that the last person did to get the guard and stuff to fit how it was, because it's just unreal. But lovely. That's how you want them. And obviously you always have to push down on the back of the bonnet hinges, no matter how good they are. And you go like this, and it pulls the bonnet back. And I would have called that, aside from rust, but that is pretty damn good. I'm going to get them both like that, and then I'm going to stop and maybe have a little cry, because I'll be so happy. But I'm pretty chuffed with that. It's all looking fairly well centered. Oh, there's a bolt there. Kick that over there. Yes, now we're proceeding. Yeah, if only the person who played with it last did it right. Well, maybe not did it right, but just put it in the right spot. A lot of some of the time I've spent in the crash shops, you sort of dread the day when you get given a taxi. If you know sort of what happens to taxis and how often they're hit. Not saying that the taxi drivers and their little companies do shonky work, but you get to see some creative work, I'm going to call it, done to cars. And yeah, I've seen tech screws and all sorts of stuff. Actually, I did one car that wasn't even a taxi. It was a Mitsubishi Lancer, late model one. And it'd been hit, and the person stuck a bar on the headlights, and instead of the bolt hole was here, the bracket was over here, so they just put a tech screw there. I was like, you didn't even remotely pull that car straight when you did that. So it's fun and games, and then they expect you to fix it. You're like, but how do you fix something that somebody else has just destroyed and made 10 times worse? Anyway, crash shop life. Anyway, I'm going to keep going. I'll get that guard lined up good. I'll get the headlights back in. I'll get the front together. And I'll call the video there, I reckon. Alrighty, I think we can call that passable, I would say. Actually looks amazing when it's got headlights in. It's like the car's got eyes. I just noticed that headlight ring's broken. Oh well. Anyway, we've got the car looking much happier. As you saw in the beginning of the video, we started with the bonnet overlapping the guard significantly, and you couldn't get that headlight to sit in there very well at all. So the fact that the bonnet sits a bit high at the back because the bonnet hinges are stuffed is throwing off. It's like an optical illusion. It looks like the gap gets way bigger at the back, but it's actually the height. But when you look at it like that, that is a relatively straight gap. It gets a little tight here, but I think the guard needs to basically tilt up a bit. But if I spend any more on this today, I'll probably go crazy, or more crazy. This one's not too bad. This one's sitting, but I think the bonnet hinges need to be replaced. They're not super happy. They're screwing up my alignment a little bit, but I think that is much better than it was. It's not a show-stopping perfect job, but at least it's now serviceable. And yeah, I'm a little bit flabbergasted. I can't believe I actually managed to succeed in my task. And the bonnet opens quite nicely. Lovely. So tomorrow I'll have to sort out how to make that pretty again. That's just temporary, as you well know. So that's how much we had to gain to get that to sit right. It's quite incredible, really. So as you remember, these were all the way to one side. Everything was just slightly over. And now it's probably less over, but a lot more centralized. At least now it's passable and serviceable. You could actually do something with it now. And shuts quite well. The bonnet hinges always, when you put it down, you're like, what's wrong with my gaps? And then you've got to go over here and push down the back corners and trip over stuff. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, and it's missing the little feet that go in the corners of the rad support that sort of level out the bonnet when you're finished. And I've got to do some rust in the bonnet. This is not a bad bonnet. We got this one locally, very, very hard to get these bonnets now. So I think that'll wrap up this video quite nicely, I think. So thank you for watching. I hope you found it entertaining. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because it really does help out, and it will help the channel grow and allow me to do way more cooler things in the future if you're pressing that button. So yeah, I think we can live with that now. Very happy. I hope some of the pointers were useful. Very handy tool. Yeah, enjoy.